Hello, Wargamers, and welcome back. Purple Druid presents Wargame Culture. Today I am here with Clint Warren-Davey, designer of Werwolf, Insurgency in Occupied Germany, 1945 to 48. He's a game designer from Australia with some interesting ideas about coin games and game design in general. And we're going to start off by mixing and matching some genres and some basic chat about game design.
That's very interesting. So, is this a fantasy coin game? Is this a game that you intend on making in the future?
It is. It absolutely is. And
Cool.
but I need to learn how to play coin games first.
Right. Okay. That'd be a good start. I mean, when I made Werewolf, I'd only played Cuba Libre. I'd only played that probably twice, and then I thought I'll have a crack at it. But then I went and read the other coin rulebook. So I read Andean Abyss, Fire in the Lake, and Cuba Libre again, and they're all very similar. Um, then you got Falling Sky, and you got Gandhi, and all the rest of them. But yeah, if you play through one or two coin games and you read the rule books, you'll understand the system. There's a few core components to it. You kind of tweak around the edges. Um, but it's a really versatile system to work with. Usually it's four factions, but yours seems to be more than four potentially.
Potentially.
So what was your thought on the setting? Like, what was the fantasy setting that you've got? What's some more detail on that?
I have a role playing game campaign that's been going on for a little over 2 years now.
Okay.
And it is a homebrew setting that is
Yep.
based on the the literary ideas of Robert E. Howard, Fred Saberhagen, specifically his Changeling Earth stories, which deal with a post apocalypse world.
Huh. Okay.
And by that I mean it's not like Mad Max is a post apocalypse world, right? You're familiar with that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
So like imagine that world 500 years farther on where things have settled down a little bit, and they've started to rebuild.
Yes. Okay.
So that would be your post apocalypse world where there are new nations, there are new trade has resumed, agriculture has resumed. It's not a world fully of you know roaming roaming bands of gasoline nomads. And in fact, a lot of that technology and a lot of that knowledge from the previous world is just lost. It's just gone. The books are gone. No, there's no more gasoline anymore because no one knows how to run the refineries. So all of that has just collapsed. Everything was scavenged from the old world. Whatever was left to help start to build a new one. Uh, in my
All right. So
mind,
medieval technology.
right? It's more medieval. Although I'm pushing it back a little bit, and it's more of a Bronze Age. So it's really more of a sword and sandal style or a sword and
Oh,
sandal
okay.
feel.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and then I tell my players, watch the old Conan movies from the '80s, and that's the look, that's the aesthetic. Everything's
Okay.
dirty and dusty, and then the actual geographical setting is based on Bronze Age Mediterranean.
Huh. Okay.
And then we're
And
using as a rule system, we're using Low Fantasy Gaming by Stephen Grodzicki. And the reason I picked that rule system is because it's just different enough from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons or regular Dungeons and Dragons that the combination of that rule setting, that aesthetic, and the geographical setting is enough to jar the players out of the concept of that they're playing in medieval England or Germany or what have you. So I wanted them to really enter a different kind of world.
so they're not just being knights and elves and rangers and orcs or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And then I made all classes, so there are no None of the traditional character classes. Everyone has a little bit kind of different abilities. And then as more of the world building, I've changed the names of the saving throws. So instead of having a save versus magic, it's save versus corruption and fell sorcery.
Right. So you're using this homebrew RPG setting to make a coin game in that same universe.
Right. And so what I was thinking was make a coin game in that universe based on existing factions, existing nations. And
Yeah.
because eventually I do want to publish this setting. I mean, obviously that's still more years in the future.
Yeah.
I mean, I have the player's guide. The player's guide is 180 pages long, but it has all of the custom rules in it. It has all the custom setting information, has all the custom classes. We do have a customized hand-to-hand, I should say, like weaponless and non-lethal combat system that I put together.
Right. Okay. So you've got that's cool. So you've got a fully
So it's a whole new RPG, and
yeah.
so I eventually would like to publish it. And I think it would be cool to also have a board game that you could play that would build on the lore. Because I've been thinking for a long time about the domain game in role playing games, and how that in the olden days, if you will, of role playing, they all came from wargaming, all the players.
Yeah.
So they were used to the idea of fighting battles and pretending, to be nations in that sense, to be domains. They were playing domains against each other. And
Yeah.
then when Dungeons and Dragons came around, they started to play individual characters. And then those characters started throwing armies at each other, diving into dungeons to get gold, to hire more troops, etc., etc. And so it occurred to me that it could be a lot of fun to have a domain board game that you could play alongside your role playing game, that it would help track those domain activities and faction activities, and it would help the dungeon master, number one, to keep track of all that stuff, but number two, it would just be fun in and of itself. And so you can
Yeah.
play this, domain level, maybe I guess in war game terms it might be an operational level war game, but there would be a lot more obviously paperwork and stuff like that associated with it. I mean, it's not going to be for everyone. It's going to be fairly niche, but
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, if it's a coin
so
game.
then as I learned about the coin games, I'm like, oh, this is perfect. This is exactly what I'm looking for, because you have your guilds that will be operating and have power
Yeah. Well, the
in different areas, but their power overlaps. Their power overlaps the political power of the kings and the barons and what have you that rule the lands and the people. And so I definitely am very, very interested in diving into the coin realm.
yeah. Well, it's about the core of it is asymmetry. So you have to have the factions operate. They have a totally different victory condition, a totally different means, totally different troop types and abilities, and then a deck of event cards where the cards will affect the various factions differently. But with your setting, it could definitely work. Usually with coin, you've got two broad types of factions. You've got insurgents and counterinsurgents. Counterinsurgents is like the government, and then the insurgents are the guerrillas or like terrorists, freedom fighters, drug dealers, criminal organizations, like activist groups, whatever. So in your setting, you could have not just two broad types. You could split it up into as many as you want, as long as they all operate with totally different victory conditions and abilities and types of pieces on the map. It would almost another game to look at for this would be Root by Leader Games. I don't know if you've seen that, but that's
I've heard of it. I've heard of it.
yeah. Well, that's a spin-off from the Coin series. So basically, it's takes the asymmetry of Coin and it makes it into a fantasy, like a little 2-hour game that's pretty accessible to most people. But it uses a lot of coin mechanics. So what you could do is something kind of like that, where you take the coin system, simplify it down a bit, but ramp up the asymmetry and have various non-military ways for the players to attack each other. And normally coin is 4 factions. Some of them are 2, some of them are 3. Yours, you could do even higher than that, potentially, although I tend to stick to 4, just because that's how the system works best. And once you get above 4, you're coming up with a lot of very, very different mechanics. And, if it's going to be asymmetric and every faction operates totally differently, once you get over 4, you've got a lot of balancing work to make sure all those factions bounce off each other in the right way. So maybe start with 4, and start with the very first one you design could be a conventional, like, government faction, which would be, I don't know, the king or the baron or the conventional power structure of that society. And then your other ones, you've got merchants or guilds or peasants or whatever. They could be various indirect or non-military ways of winning. They could be your political factions. And then you also need, usually with coin, you have hidden troops, or you have hidden units. So there's a 2-step process to uncovering the units. So if you're one of the weaker factions in a conventional sense, like you don't have big armies moving around the map, you've got guerrillas or insurgents or terrorists or whatever. They are underground or they're active. While they're underground, they can't be hit. And then the government type factions have got to sweep into an area and uncover them, and then on a later turn kill them. But by the time they get round to doing that, you may have got those revealed troops back to being underground or moved them away or something. So the insurgent type factions have an information advantage over the counterinsurgents. That's one of the really interesting parts of it, as well as the asymmetry and the turn order being different every turn. So you what's going to be the turn order 1 turn in advance, but after that you don't know. So it's like that 2-step process combined with a random turn order, where you don't know whether you're going to have the time or the available actions to locate, hunt down, and kill the insurgents. It gives them the chance to get away and wreak havoc on other parts of the map. So I would say that's the core elements you need, is that the sequence of play with the unpredictable turn order, the hidden units, which gives the information advantage to some of the factions, and you need asymmetry. So the factions operate in a totally different way. Like they might have a different way of getting resources. They have a different way of getting victory points. All of their attacks are a fundamentally different action. And I guess one more thing with coin is it's kind of like a Euro game in that the battles are not dice based, and they're not usually card based either. It's literally just, I do an assault in this space, I have 3 troops, and that kills 3 of your pieces. It's just 1 for 1. Really, really simple. And it's like a Euro game in that you're moving wooden cubes around a map, but it's not like a hex and counter war game where you're rolling dice and consulting an odds chart. Like, there's no charts, there's very few tables or maths or modifiers or anything like that. It's just pick an action and just do what the action says. So it might be, an attack is just each one of your guys kills 1 enemy guy, or whatever, or if it's a terror attack, which is pretty common in coin, and I've got it in Werewolf, you activate a gorilla and it places a terror marker in the space and it shifts the population loyalty of the space in one direction or the other, which is normally how the insurgents win, is getting the population on their side, and they do that through terror. So that's kind of what you need. It's a lot of things. It's that sequence of play, the hidden information, the asymmetry, and the Euro style mechanics. All of that together is what I think makes a coin game, and all of that could work for your setting. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Thanks again, Wargamers, for listening to the very first Design Journal podcast. Thank you also to Clint Davey for participating and sharing some extremely interesting thoughts. The rest of this podcast can be heard in its entirety on wargameculture.substack.com. Please consider clicking over there and becoming a subscriber for full benefits. Be sure to check out the About page. Thanks again, and have a great day.